excited. Greetings and welcome to our special Teacher Talk webinar this afternoon, Lessons from Advanced Online Teachers and Advice for Getting Started in Online Learning. My name is Bruce Friend. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Aurora Institute. On behalf of all of my colleagues at the Aurora Institute, we're so pleased that you have joined us for some sharing and discussion on this important topic. The worldwide spread of the coronavirus, resulting in educators having to suddenly shift to remote delivery of instruction, has been a massive system-wide change for teachers and their students. And while online learning options have been around for decades, and many teachers did have some experience in teaching in an online or blended setting, the challenges of moving all teaching and learning to a remote setting are immense, as probably many of you on today's webinar can attest to. Online teaching requires strategies, tools, and new methods for engagement and participation. How do teachers build culture and community in online classrooms? What are strategies for online learner engagement? What methods support high-quality instruction and assessment for anytime, anywhere learning? Today, we are fortunate to have three presenters who have a great deal of experience with online learning and ensuring high-quality instruction. I, like you, are eager to hear and learn from them. Please allow me to introduce our honored guests. Our first speaker will be Megan Quillen. Megan serves as the Coordinator for Online Learning and Instructional Technology for Horry County Public Schools in South Carolina. Megan's online teaching experience includes teaching online high school courses at Horry County Virtual School, as well as college-level courses at Coastal Carolina University. Megan also has the unique and very important role of serving as a mentor to all newly hired online teachers in her district. Our second speaker will be Dr. Kathryn Derby. Dr. Derby has been an online instructor and instructional designer since 2002. Prior to teaching online, she was a middle school art teacher. Dr. Derby currently teaches fine arts for the New Hampshire Virtual Learning Academy Charter School, also known as VLAX. Her teaching philosophy is based on building relationships, personalized learning, and incorporating various instructional strategies in order to provide instruction and support that focuses on student success. Our third speaker will be Dr. Courtney Teague. Dr. Teague is an Associate Director of Professional Learning with the Verizon Innovative Learning Schools Initiative at Digital Promise. She is also an online adjunct graduate professor at Thomas University. She supports and informs the delivery of instruction in schools to create rigorous, relevant, and engaging instructional programs through targeted support and implementation of innovative technology solutions focused on high levels of student achievement. Thank you, Megan, Jackie, and Courtney for joining us here this afternoon. Before we begin, please know that after each of our three speakers have shared their insights, we will have a question and answer session. We encourage you to utilize the chat room feature to submit your questions, and we will do our very best to get to as many of the questions as possible. So without any further waiting, let's get started. And Megan, I'm going to hand it over to you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Bruce. And hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today, mainly because whenever we get a large group of educators together, I know that there's going to be a lot of great learning involved. So I'm happy to be here, and we'll go ahead and jump right into it. So just a brief little overview of what we'll be covering this first 10 minutes. So I'm going to focus in on some e-learning strategies from the perspective of helping and supporting our online teachers. And these strategies can help both teachers who are fully online based and also those teachers who are kind of playing both roles right now, as Bruce mentioned, trying to do the e-learning thing with our face-to-face students as well. So I'm going to focus on mainly those items that my teachers oftentimes need support with when they're new to teaching online. And some of those things usually result around the professionalism and how to create that virtual meeting environment with your students. So looking at some of the e-learning strategies, the biggest thing that I do when I'm supporting my teachers who teach face-to-face in the face-to-face classroom but also have their online students is talking about what it looks like in a virtual environment when it comes to professionalism. Professionalism is one of those things as teachers that we take very seriously, and in our face-to-face classrooms, this kind of comes naturally. But what do we do when we're tasked with meeting with our students in a virtual environment as opposed to in the classroom? So one of the first tips that we give our teachers is just to be sure that you choose a space in your home that has a plain background and dress appropriately as if you were in your face-to-face classroom. And as always, be mindful of the lighting and the sound. And note that you might have to use a microphone or some headphones when you're meeting with your students. The audio quality is a huge deal when that becomes one of the first perspectives from your student's view. The biggest thing I can recommend when you're starting out in a virtual meeting environment is to practice. And one thing that I do with my teachers who teach online is I set up practice sessions with them ahead of time. So those of you who are here and you're mentors or you are a coach and you're helping to support your teachers who are meeting virtually with their students or maybe even other stakeholders in the school, one thing that you might want to consider is setting up a practice environment for these teachers so that they can go into their first virtual meeting environment and feel fully confident with the meeting tool and all the resources that they may share. When looking at your virtual meeting environment, one of the first things, and this is oftentimes chosen for you by your district or by your department or whatever institution it is that you're working with, but you want to identify a common place for you and your students. So some of the common ones that I'm sure you've heard of are some LMSs like Moodle, Google Classroom, Seesaw. So whichever one you feel most comfortable with or whichever one your program utilizes the most, just be sure to be consistent. Choose one, make sure that the students are acclimated to it, and stick with that one throughout. Having open communication is super important when we have this virtual meeting environment. Having visible contact information is probably the most important aspect here because students know where to find you when they're in our face-to-face classrooms, but it can oftentimes be a little confusing when they have several teachers offering different times during the day when they're available to meet virtually. So be sure that that contact information is visible. There's some cool ways that you could make just like a simple slide and turn it into an image and post that digitally in whatever LMS or whatever learning management system that you are using. Be mindful that students might need multiple ways to chime in with that. So having access to both phone, email, and other ways as well, because not all students will have access via the Zoom application or whatever application it is that you're using. It's always good to have a start-end time and stick to it. When students are coming in and out of our sessions, that can be a little confusing and distracting for the participants that are joined with you. So it's really important to kind of set those norms and those expectations up front when we're meeting with our students. And as always include some time at the end for some question and answering. That's really when you can make it more personalized as well, when opening it up for questions and having students kind of chime in and giving some of their experiences and whatever it is that you were talking about during that virtual meeting. Some additional tips when you're meeting virtually. A lot of times the tool that you're using with your students, so I know a couple popular ones are the Zoom conferencing tools. We have this Blackboard Collaborate, and we also have Google Meet. Whatever tool that you choose to use, I just encourage you to become very familiar with it and to create some type of a one-pager or one slide that you go over with your students during that very first meeting, setting up those norms of how to use an online tool. So we do that often in our classrooms with classroom expectations, but sometimes it's very helpful to do this at the very beginning of an online meeting just to go over what's acceptable when it comes to the chat room, raising their hand feature, and those types of items. So teacher availability, this is something that usually we're available at all times for teachers, but you can learn really quickly that this is an easy way to be burnt out. So I encourage you to definitely choose what your online availability is going to be and stick with it. And you want to prioritize those opportunities for face-to-face interaction. So if you've said and committed to be somewhere online virtually for your students, make sure you do so because definitely your students are looking forward to seeing your faces And that is definitely the time to get that one-on-one face-to-face interaction, which is so important, as we know as teachers, for our students, to keep that class community going. This is very helpful if you share a weekly schedule with your students, so that week to week they're kind of updated with when you're going to be available. And again, when you're responding to students and their assignments, be really creative with that. When we're in the face-to-face classroom, a lot of times it's easy just to put a comment on a Google Doc or whatever platform your students are using. But in this case, just to hear your voice might just be a little bit more effective in this case. So there's a lot of features these days where you can just give a quick voice comment back. So I consider you to play around with some of those features, because it really just brings that humanity back into your teaching. So flexible pacing. This is probably one of the most unique aspects of teaching online, and this is probably where I mentor my teachers the most. So I have 13 teachers who teach for our HCS virtual program, and what we do is we make sure that in the very beginning we set a pacing guide for each course, depending on how long that course is paced for. But then beyond that, students have the option to kind of fill in their dates and what works with them. So I would say definitely when you're choosing activities or if you're choosing for something for your students to do, keep in mind that you want it to be flexible when it comes to the due dates. You want to schedule all virtual meetings well in advance so students have time to coordinate with their parents or their brothers and sisters who might be using a common area at home. And at all possible, be sure to record your meeting if it's possible. Just for those students who were not able to attend, they'll be able to view it later. An example of this is one thing that I've done for my teachers is I've created each of them a template that all they have to do is go in and set up their dates and the times that they're available for their Zoom sessions. And then that's already posted in each Moodle course for the students. So again, those of you who are mentors or are coaches and you're looking for ways to kind of lighten the load on our teachers, consider creating these things ahead of time for then the teachers just to plug in when they're available. That tends to help just a little bit, and it also helps from the students' perspective because they're not having to look at 4 different styles of a schedule, and it kind of just becomes a little bit easier to understand. Just a couple other things to consider. It wouldn't be a bad idea just to somewhat poll your students to see what their home technology situation is like. That would be a really quick and easy thing for you to do, just to kind of see what you're dealing with from their perspective. Keep it interesting and fun. I think sometimes when we move to this online world, we automatically think that everything has to be structured and something that you'll be able to view. I just think it's important to keep it fun. I think it's important to do polls with your students to keep that engagement up and to remind them that they are a part of this learning experience. Using a mix of videos, voices, images to keep that personal connection going is always great. If you have some type of a place where you're posting weekly announcements, it's always good to have more of a personal one in there as opposed to it always being academic-based. So I oftentimes remind my teachers on Friday to send out a Happy Friday announcement to their students, and it usually involves some type of meme, and the students reply back. But again, it just helps the students remember that that forum is there for several reasons, not only just to give important information, but also to share that connection with their teachers as well. So I saved the tools for the last because I think the pedagogy behind our online teaching is what's most important, and we can be successful with pretty much any of these tools, considering all the other items that we just touched base on. I put a few ideas up here and some tools that I know my teachers usually go to. So if you're looking for a good LMS, learning management system, or if you're looking for a good screen capture tool, video conferencing, or a response tool, these are some go-tos that I know my teachers use often. Especially those response tools, just to get those engagements up in those virtual assignments that we're creating for our students. So that is what I had to share with you all today. I'm very excited to hear what everyone else has to say as well. If you have any questions or want to follow up later, I have put my information here. And also, later, if you're interested, if you check out our Dear Dis YouTube channel, it actually has hundreds of tutorial videos that are specific to supporting online teaching. So if you're interested in looking for some additional tools and some examples of how to use them in your online environment, be sure to check that out. And thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you, Megan. We really appreciate that information, that sharing, and we appreciate you staying on the line with us here too. As again, we'll have questions and answers at the end. I'm sure some of our audience members will have questions for you. And again, those in the audience, feel free to use the chat room to introduce yourself and submit questions that you may have. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our next distinguished speaker, Dr. Kathryn Derby from VLAX in New Hampshire. Good afternoon, Jackie.
Hi, and thank you very much, Bruce. I'm very happy to be here today. So I want to start by saying that our current situation has challenged everyone, as Bruce noted earlier. Educators have been asked to do something that would have, almost been unthinkable 20 or even 10 years ago. You've been asked to transition from that traditional classroom to an online classroom, and it seems like it happened overnight. So the first thing I really want everyone to do is embrace the fact that this is challenging and there is a learning curve to it. And it takes time to feel comfortable with the online format. But you're going to be able to take the things you learned during this experience and apply it back to your traditional face-to-face classrooms later on. So I was lucky enough to have a great mentoring program and training program when I started, much like Megan talked about what she does. But along the way, I also learned many things from experiences, and I'm still learning new techniques because it's amazing how quickly this environment changes. So as with a traditional classroom, you're going to find that what works with one group of students doesn't always work with the next group of students. But there are some important things that can help foster a positive online learning community and set that good base foundation. And those are what I want to share with you today. I have three main areas I want to focus on, and you're going to see some overlapping between what Megan said and what I said, because these are really good practices for anyone, whether you're teaching kindergarten or teaching college level. And the first one is that being consistent. To set up a virtual meeting space where students can find materials and stick with one place where you post to all the time. It could be an LMS. I know Megan talked about that. It could be a website or a blog, but it needs to be one place where students know where to go. That creates that comfort level. And limit the amount of tools you use. Having 3 or 4 really good, strong tools, using the same web conference room every time, using the same LMS every time, can help start creating that comfort and give students some place to go where they know what to do. I also want to have you consider having some type of, depending on what grade level you're in, either daily or weekly checklist of what students need to do. I know that a pacing chart was mentioned before. This gives students something to check off when they've done everything, and it helps them feel like they've finished everything that needs to be done. It gives them a completion point for either the day or the week. So it could be something that they actually print out and physically check off, or it could be something just, a bullet list that they can see. The next one is be very specific with your instructions and repeat your expectations wherever you're talking about something that you want them to do. This is going to save you a ton of time with questions later on. Use bullet points when you're giving step-by-step instructions. Students don't read these long paragraphs of what to do, but they will go step-by-step down a bullet point list. And don't assume they know how to use digital tools for learning. We all know they know how to use it for socialization, but not always for learning. So you may have to give some instruction on how to use different kinds of tools for learning. Another great idea is a micro lecture. These are 1 to 3 minute short videos. This is a YouTube generation where they're used to going out and watching videos to learn how to do something, where you have a screencast on how to do something. If you want your students to go to a specific website and log in and do an activity, show them in a short screencast. that they can use. This is particularly helpful if you have very young students and their parents are helping them out, because parents can watch these instructional videos and then help their students go step by step through it. And don't be afraid to go outside and demonstrate. You know, camera phones are wonderful for taking videos. You don't have to sit right in front of your computer all the time. So if you want to demonstrate something, you're teaching a science class, and, you know, go out and, you know, feel free to explore. That's always very helpful. The next thing I have is to be consistent with your time. And again, this is another thing I overlapped with Megan. It's so easy to become a 24/7 job when you're teaching online, because you can constantly check emails, you can constantly grade papers. So have yourself some barriers. Set yourself a place to sleep, a place to eat, a place to work, and a place to relax. And, you know, take care of yourself and your family. When you want to set times for, let's say, answering emails, my practice is that I like to answer emails first thing in the morning, after lunch, and then right before the end of the day. So my students know that if they send me a message like at 10 in the morning, I'm going to respond after lunch to it. And students start learning your routine. But I'm not going to be one that's going to sit and answer emails at 10 o'clock at night. So that's something you really want to set those boundaries. The next main area that I have is to take advantage of what online learning has to offer. This is a very different environment than your traditional environment. So first of all, assume everything's open book. So rethink your assessments. Multiple choice quizzes are not the most effective. Students will look up answers, so go with it. You know, they have this wealth of knowledge at their fingertips. So take advantage of online resources like simulations, interactives, videos that are pre-made. Have students look up these things and use them as an instructional tool. You don't have to be the sole provider of instructional materials or instruction here. You can pull in some of these other resources. The second item I have is give students options for demonstrating knowledge. You've got to remember there's not always equal access to resources in every single home that's out there. Some students will have access to things, some won't. For instance, when I taught middle school, one of the things I taught was a color wheel. So my main learning objective was for students to identify primary, secondary, and intermediate colors and place them on a color wheel and explain how color mixing works. So I created a rubric around those learning objectives. And then I gave students options. So one option was they could create a presentation for me explaining the different parts of the color wheel and how colors were mixed. Another option was that they could simulate a blog post. So they were writing a paper that was like what they would post on a blog that plays the parts of the color wheel. And the third option, they could videotape themselves actually creating a color wheel with paint and placing the colors and explaining it. And then, of course, I gave them the option if they could think of something else and they wanted to ask me for permission, then that was fine too. But I could assess their competency in these different learning objectives by giving students these different options. And, you know, when you do this, you tap into their talents and interests, and you have them taking control of their own learning, which is so important for motivation, especially in that online learning environment. The next one I wanted to promote is talking about online discussions. Consider having one online discussion question during the week that has a broad question that allows for multiple perspectives, and then have students post an initial reply by Tuesday. And then by Friday, have them come in and respond to at least 2 classmates. Now what this is going to do is this is going to create some activity in the classroom. It's going to give a sense of community. It's going to allow you to step in and redirect students that may have misinformation or if the discussion starts going a different way. So this makes a reason for students to come in daily and check the discussion and check what's going on. And one thing I found is that my traditional students that are quiet and sit in the back of the classroom and don't talk really shine in these online discussions. They have time to formulate their responses. They can't just sit back in the room and sit quietly by. So lastly on this one is the feedback. You want to be clear and concise. I heard Megan also talk about this. students, when they get a paper back in a traditional room, they compare it with their other classmates, they look at each other's work. Here they can't do that. So the only feedback they're getting is from you. So really make sure it's clear, and that, this gives you the opportunity to help them transition on to the next project by telling them, this is what you did really well, this is what you need to work on, and here we go on to the next project. So my final area is leverage this time now to build relationships. You've got this unique opportunity to make a one-on-one connection with your student and even their parent. You have the ability to talk to them privately, to make sure you're addressing their needs. So set office hours, whatever they are, be consistent so that parents and students can stop by and ask you questions. And this is also a time where you can reach out to these students and talk to them and encourage them to use it. I also suggest having a survey, maybe at the end of the week, or a poll where you ask them what they liked about the week, what they were challenged with, and what they would like to see next week. And this gives you feedback on what really helps them and gives them a voice in the process. And finally, use that LMS to track student participation. In there's always an area where you can go in and see how much time your students spent in that classroom. And if you notice a student has slacked off or hasn't put in a lot of work, they may be feeling frustrated. So this is a time for you to reach out to them and say, hey, I notice you're not participating as much. And they know you care, and they know that you are watching, and that will help increase their participation in the future. So these are the strategies that I've used in my online classroom that I feel really helps to set a positive tone that supports students. And I hope that you find these strategies helpful and that you're able to take some of these back to your classroom. And I'm looking forward to any questions you may have later on.
Thank you, Dr. Derby. That's very important information, and with your years of experience in teaching online, there's just some great ideas and helpful hints. And I can see from comments in the chat room, your comments and Megan's as well are inspiring some sharing and thought, which is terrific. Again, welcome folks to submit their questions in the chat room, and we'll get into those shortly as well. Our next speaker is Dr. Courtney Teague, Associate Director of Professional Learning at the Verizon Innovative Learning Schools, directed by Digital Promise. Dr. Teague, welcome this afternoon.
Thank you, Bruce. All right. Everyone, I am super excited to share with you because although COVID-19 has changed the way we view traditional education, the way that we live our daily life, it is an opportunity for us to take chances with learning. We are all on the same page of being a first-year teacher, so it's okay. We have the opportunity to actually lay the foundation of what online learning looks like. Yes, we have distance learning as it was yesterday, but now we have an opportunity to show what our students can do in a time of an emergency. So today, I want to share a few tips and tricks for getting started with online learning. And of course, my fellow co-presenters, we're going to actually repeat some of the same things. But, as educators, repetition is key, especially if it's valid information. All right, so first things first. It's already hard to hold our students' attention in person, and it's even harder to hold it online. You may want to consider shortening that experience. The online environment tends to be different than that face-to-face. We don't know what the students have going on at home. They may have a sick parent, grandparent there, and they may not be able to be fully present during that instructional time, especially if it is virtual, and it's synchronous. And synchronous means that the students are there and the teacher is online at the same time. So just keep it simple, Smarty, and just be compact. And one other thing I would like to add to keeping it simple is, remember, everyone's new at this. And the next point I would like to make is have consistent online configuration.
as if you were in your traditional class. You would have a common board configuration. Your classroom will be organized in a way that would be reflective of the instructional plans for that day. So keep a consistent online configuration for your students. In the very beginning, you should call a meeting with your students and say, hey, this is new. Let's create classroom agreements. Let's not call them rules. Let's call them agreements, because it will promote collaboration. You may even want to hand students a digital handout with updated links, especially if you don't have a learning management system within your district. Giving students one handout that you update each week with various links and resources that you'll be referencing will serve its purpose. I mean, just like in that traditional classroom, you'll have resources available for those students. You should have them available online. And if you're using new tools with your students, I would also offer hint cards to teach them how to use the tool. So you won't spend your online time, your face-to-face virtual time with them, teaching them how to use the tool. You can find pre-recorded videos online to share with them as pre-work, and also provide your students with high-quality examples. It is totally okay to use open resources that you find online, or just ask permission to use it. Using collaborative tools. This could be super fun because you can actually take attendance this way, and using collaborative tools such as Microsoft Word, Slides, Google Slides, Excel, PowerPoint, any of those tools will allow for students to collaborate, and they'll hold them accountable. And at any given time during your lesson, you may say, hey, I want to check your understanding. I have a PowerPoint. I want you to do a quick summary in your collaborative group, and all of the students will have to go to their respective slides and contribute. And during that moment, you'll see if the students are understanding the content that's being taught. That's a form of formative assessment, but it's also holding those students accountable while keeping them engaged. So you don't have to really even call attendance online, because if you have a resource that requires the students to contribute to, if you don't see their name, it's like, hey, are you really here, or are you just online and not participating? You can also use familiar and accessible resources. It's totally unrealistic to expect you as a new teacher, remember we're all first-year teachers, to expect you on your own to create a semester's worth of high-quality videos. You may want to find pre-developed resources available online and provide students with the links in that digital handout. Using open resources helps prevent access problems for students, and if any of your suggested resources are not accessible, I tell you, students will email you. So before you share a resource with those students, check it out for yourself to make sure it works. And just spending an extra few minutes while you're planning to look for curated content that's accessible for your students, it will save you a lot of Tylenol or Advil in the long run. And don't be afraid as a teacher to ask for help and show emotions online. Our students, many of our students, we are teachers by purpose and by passion, and we may be the only consistent thing in our students' lives, and showing them that you're emotional and that you are in this with them is super important. Online teachers, emotional openness is a great instructional strategy, cueing that social emotional learning. If you tell your students that it's your first time teaching online and you're actually learning while teaching, they will look at it differently. And if you even ask Johnny or Brittany to help you and reassuring them that you'll do your very best if they can help you learn a specific tool or a specific application or just help you teach online, they will look at you differently, and I guarantee you their response and their engagement levels will change. So always be willing to ask for help. There's nothing wrong with asking for help, okay? You may also want to pre-record your lectures. I know earlier both of the presenters mentioned that. Pre-record your lectures and make that a part of your classroom agreement, and make sure you put your lectures, if possible, on that digital handout. Because you never know, with that student who's unwell and maybe struggling with internet access, they may have missed that live opportunity to meet with you. If you record the videos instead and just send them to your students so they can watch in their own time, they will respond differently. And it also gives those students with diverse learning needs the opportunity to hear you over and over again. They are in control of their learning. Showing your face. Showing your face is super, super, super vital for our students. As you see, this is actually a screenshot of an assistant principal in one of our schools at Matter Academy, and she changes her background every day with inspirational messages for her students and just little reminders. And you can see she says to them, stay safe, be well, wash your hands, love and miss you. And she's telling them that she wishes each of them a great day so that they'll be amazing. And remember, a smile a day keeps students at bay, and it sends a message that you are present and you are experiencing life with them. And one thing to also note that several studies have been done, and they show that lecture videos that show instructors' faces are more effective than simple narrated slideshows. So put yourself on camera. So a quick tip recap. Have consistent online configuration, use collaborative tools, use familiar tools, ask for help and show emotion, pre-record your lectures, and always show your face. I hope you appreciate these quick tips, and please understand that we are here to support you. Your PLC has just expanded by 3 thought leaders in this field, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask me or 2 of our other co-presenters. Bruce, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. T. Really appreciate those insights and that advice. And for you and all of our speakers here today. I was taking notes throughout your presentations, and I think that while some of it, there was consistency in some of the things that you shared, and there's a reason for that, because you're very skilled, all 3 are very skilled in this world of online learning and sort of know what works and how to really motivate and get the best out of your students. And so I think some of those things that I heard were things like, first of all, communication being so critical, not just in consistency in how you communicate, but where you communicate as well, and making sure that all of your students and your parents know where they can always find the latest information and expectations in terms of how you'll be communicating with them. Managing your own work schedules and routines. I think Dr. Derby mentioned that. You need to find yourself as a new to the world of online teaching, that you set your own work-life balances as well. I know, personally speaking, in a lot of the programs that I've had a chance to be an administrator in, the challenge with my online teachers was never getting them to turn their computer on. It was always to get them to turn it off. And so you need to make sure you have those balances. Keep instructional time and content concise. It is easy to provide too much content for students in large chunks, and you got to be very mindful of that. I like Dr. T, what you shared around using tools that promote collaboration with your students and with you and your students, but students between each other as well is really important. And last but not least, I love the concept you mentioned of emotional openness. Let yourself be honest with your students and sharing that this may be new to you as well, and don't be shy about asking help from your colleagues. I'd even say don't be shy for asking for help from your students. They may know some of the technologies better than we do, and so I love that concept of emotional openness. So thank you all for your time this afternoon. We do have time for questions. I've been following the thread. I really enjoy seeing some of the comments in here. I'm going to encourage anyone who asks questions to go ahead and write your question in the main chat room. We'll try to get to them. One question I see, and I'll open it up to whomever would like to field this, one of our presenters. We have a question from Jody that says, I want my students to view each other's projects online and then comment on a couple of them. I'm wondering what would be the best thread or resource for them to provide feedback on. Any thoughts on that?
I would suggest using Padlet. Padlet is a great collaborative tool, and there are a few filters on there that will allow you to monitor what the students are posting. One thing to note about Padlet is that you can also copy the same template and use it for multiple classes. And you can also use the rating feature on Padlet, which will allow the students to like or even comment. But if you don't want them to use those features, you can turn that off. Padlet is a really great tool, and the ease is really easy to use.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to comment on that? Not necessary, but just if anyone else has any other resources to suggest.
To be honest, I 100%. I 100% agree that Padlet would be I think there's a little bit of feedback there. Okay, here we go. So I agree that Padlet would be your best tool for that. We've made a little bit of a joke in Horry County with Padlet, just a heads up, because for the longest time Padlet was completely free. We've been calling it Padlet lately because you may know that they've limited the number of Padlets that you can open. But as Dr. Courtney mentioned, that is very easy to get around because you could use the same one for multiple classes and swap out that information. But I think that Padlet is absolutely the best tool when it comes to quick response for your students, for sure.
And Megan, one thing I would like to add is one of the features in Padlet, it'll allow you to download the content into a PDF. So if the students submit their projects, if it's a written project or just a slide deck and you just want evidence that the students completed the task, you can actually download the content into a PDF and just delete the comments and then start all over. And yes, Megan, before they changed over Padlet to the 3, I think it's the limit of 3, I created like 40 Padlets so I could have access to those to use them. So I remember.
Thank you for that, both of you. Another question that has comes from Scott. Scott's asking, can someone please comment on how time might be used differently with online learners compared to those inside traditional classroom spaces? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to scroll to the question here. I believe, so a lot of times, if I'm understanding the question correctly, we only have so much time with our students if we are going to ask them to meet in a virtual environment. And so I really liked what Dr. Courtney said and Dr. Derby. I think it's important to dedicate a good portion of that time to checking in with your students, seeing how they're doing, reminding them that I think it was Dr. Courtney that said that we're living this life with them right now. So checking in with them, I think, should be the majority of that time that you spend with students. But then a lot of it should be going back over that feedback or specific things that you have caught in looking at your students' responses that might be a good choice of time to bring everyone together. So looking at the data that you've collected, depending on what activities you've provided for your students, and narrowing it down to maybe the top 5 things or the top 3 things that maybe would benefit all of your students at that time. I think what you want to avoid here is drawing it out and having too many things that you discuss maybe not pertain to everyone in the room. So I just think keeping it engaging and connecting with your students for the short time we have with them. If I understood the question correctly, that would be my suggestion there.
Thank you. Yes, and Scott, we can follow up if you have additional questions on that particular topic. Another question that's come in, and this is specific to younger students, which we know certainly from experience might require a little bit more support and, do I dare say, hand-holding than some of our older students. But Sue is asking, do we have any suggestions for keeping younger elementary students engaged in digital learning?
Yes. With younger students, of course, we know they are easily distracted, but I've sat in a few virtual classes, and I noticed teachers were using theme days. They may have Music Monday where the students understood that, hey, if we have a limited amount of distractions, we'll have a musical guest. So the teacher created anticipation in the very beginning, and the students were reminded that, hey, if we behave this way online and we participate, we'll have that special musical guest at the end. They even had theme Tuesdays where it was Taco Tuesday, the teacher would read a book. Using themes and just letting the students know, although they're young, letting them know in advance the expectation will make a difference. And still understand that whatever the traditional day looks like in your school district, I mean, take 25% of that for the student's attention span. So the activities you have and what you probably would do in a face-to-face class could not be the same activities that you do online. So you will have to modify and also have call and response activities in which it may be a lot of oral conversations and a lot of visuals. Make sure your visuals are rich, that you're using with those younger students, and things that will pique their interest. And you can even use the whiteboard if you're using Zoom or if you're using Collaborate like we're using now. Using those tools that come with the video conferencing software that you're using could also engage those students.
Thank you, Dr. Teague. Megan or Dr. Derby, any thoughts on that, particularly with younger students, that you would want to respond to?
I think Dr. Darby said she lost the ability to speak.
Oh, no. Okay, we'll have to see if we can correct that in the next few minutes here.
I completely agree with Dr. Courtney there, and I just put in the chat there that if anybody's trying to decide between learning management systems, I would recommend Seesaw for our younger users. It's very user-friendly and a great way to keep the parents involved as well.
So thank you for that, Megan. And actually that leads into another question. You just mentioned parents, because they're obviously a really important part of this teaching and learning model as well, not just in virtual settings, but obviously in face-to-face settings as well. But specific to the online setting, what are some of the tips and tricks that you've used to really get parents not just engaged and to kind of be an extension of you as the teacher, but also keeping them informed of their child's progress? Can you share any thoughts around engaging with parents and the importance thereof and how you do it?
Let's see if this works now. Oh, it does. I have the ability to talk again. Great. This is Jackie. Yeah, engaging parents is so important, but a lot of times you have to initiate that. Don't be afraid to call parents. That's one of the first things. When I was taught in the traditional environment, I didn't have a lot of conversations with parents. But once I got online, I started learning about picking up the phone and calling and talking to them about their progress. You have extra time where you can do this one-on-one now. You don't have to have the parents come to you. So one thing I would do is maybe set up a time each week where you pick a certain number of parents, depending on how many students you have, to call and just touch base. And your parents will certainly appreciate that.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of that, a couple tools that come to mind that I'm sure you all have heard of before, but I wanted to validate them because I have personal experience with these ones. A lot of our teachers use Remind 101, or they'll invite their parents directly into the LMS to get updates on their students. So for Google Classroom, there's a specific area for parents to join in as a user, and they get access to just their students' information. And the same is true for Seesaw. I know Class Dojo is a big one for some of the younger population, which is also a good way to reach out and stay connected with parents. So those are the digital tools that come to mind. Going off of what Dr. Derby just mentioned, if you did plan to call parents, I know sometimes teachers can be weary of using their personal phone lines, and since we're not in a building where we can use the school's phone, one idea is to set up a Google Voice phone number. So I know my virtual school teachers all had a Google Voice phone number, so it just basically creates another number that when you call students, that's what shows up. So that would be the number that you would put on your contact information and visible for your parents and your students. And the cool thing is that it goes right to your phone, but it just uses a number, a different number for you.
Thank you both. I think we have time for one or two more questions, and we have a question that is coming from Derek, and Derek joins us all the way from New Zealand. So good afternoon, Derek. Derek's question is, what about the opportunity to explore the changing role of the teacher? For example, teachers working in teams rather than translate the traditional one teacher to one class relationship from the face-to-face setting. Any thoughts on that or experiences you have in working in teams in an online environment?
I've just recently spoke with one of our school leaders, and as it relates to teachers working in teams, they determined, the teachers sat around in their PLC virtually, of course not physically, and they determined that, hey, I have opportunities that I really don't understand this content very well and I'm not comfortable with teaching it online. Let's take math, for example. And so the math teachers decided that, hey, I will teach everything related to data analysis and you teach everything related to number sense. The teachers decided that that will actually help them with planning and help them leverage and be more impactful if they change the way they actually taught. And so they did that, and they found success in it because students had the opportunity to learn from someone differently and have someone that is an expert in that area teach it.
Thank you for that. I think that one of the things that, if I may add in on that too, is think about how we can, through online learning, really foster even project-based learning opportunities for students as well. So as you think about building or utilizing digital curriculum, how can you collaborate with your teachers who may be teaching different subjects or different competencies, but building together a real nice competency, or I'm sorry, project-based approach to learning for the students. I'll give it another few seconds to see if we have any more questions come into the chat room here. And with that, I'll also open up back to our speakers. Megan, Dr. Derby, Dr. Teague, any last minute thoughts you want to share with our attendees who are coming to us from around the world today?
I would just say don't be afraid to be innovative and try something new. I mean, there's lots of strategies we've all come up with. There's lots of tips that we can give you, but really this is a very fluid learning environment and things change, and you really need to look at what is best for your students and get their input and make these changes and evaluate and then reassess. You know, this is all about change and growth, and so embrace this and your chance to really learn and make a difference and be innovative.
Yeah, and I also think this is such an awesome opportunity for all of us to remind our students that this is really a step in the direction of where they're going anyways. And so I think sometimes us adults it's easy for us to be like, oh, I know we're getting through this together and everything's going to, you know, go back to the way it was. But I think instead, if we change the perspective to, you know what, this is kind of an awesome opportunity for us to be putting into place where our world's going anyways. I just think our students would perceive that so well, and it just kind of changed the whole perspective of us all doing this online learning together. So good luck, and I'm so happy to be here and learn with you all.
All right. And I would like to just simply share an affirmation that I share with the teachers that I support. And it goes like this. I am one. I am only one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. I will not let what I cannot do interfere with what I can do. Greater I am because we are. Remember, although you may be at home by yourself and social distancing, you have a group of people in your PLC that are willing to help you. So always ask for help and don't be afraid. And please share too. If you have great things happening, share out on social media as well.
Well, thank you all. And well, you just struck a chord because we have a comment that just came in and said, can you please provide that little poem? And there you go. Thank you, Dr. Key. I really want to thank all of our presenters today. They, like everyone probably who joined us this afternoon, took time out of their very busy schedules to not just prepare for this over the last week or so, but to join us today and share their insights. And hopefully all of our attendees here will walk away with some new ideas and strategies. And this webinar will be available on our website for archive viewing if you want to share it with others. And you can always get in touch with us if we can help facilitate any of our attendees getting in touch with our speakers today. We can do that as well. But I do want to thank everyone for joining. I do have one last thing I'll share with you is that this is a series, part of a webinar series that we put together on a regular basis. And our next webinar, if you're interested, is scheduled for 3 o'clock on May 12th. That webinar is entitled An Introduction to Competency-Based Education. So I encourage you to mark your calendars and sign up for that as well. But again, I want to thank all of our speakers and all of our attendees today for your time, and keep doing what you're doing in terms of providing great instructional resources and support to our students, even though we're doing it in a remote environment. And to all of those who are with us today too, most importantly, stay healthy, you and your family and friends. I hope you're doing well. So on behalf of the Aurora Institute staff, I'm honored that you joined us today, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you so much.